To further discuss Blinken's visit to Israel, Sahar Khamis joins us live now from Doha. She is a fellow with the Middle East Council on Global Affairs. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the program. Now, it's seen that Antony Blinken is bringing the Arab states' messaging to Israel during this visit of his. What do you expect the outcome to be?
Thank you so much for having me. I wish I had a more optimistic message, but I think that all the indications show that there is still an Israeli resilience to continue the assault on Gaza. We have seen the escalation of the military attacks and efforts to escalate the conflict from the Israeli side. More Palestinian innocent civilians are being killed. We are not seeing signs of de-escalation from the Israeli side. And therefore, this is really putting the United States and its own diplomacy, I think, in a very tough and difficult position, because the message that the United States would like to stress now is a message of containing this conflict. The United States does not want to see this conflict expand and be prolonged further than that. It wants to pretty much, try to take control of the situation and try to make it shorter and to make it more contained in a shorter time frame. And this is different from Netanyahu's and his administration's position, which is basically escalation, continuation of the attacks, and prolonging the attack on Gaza. So we are seeing more and more discrepancy between the Israeli position on one hand and the American position on the other hand, and that really decreases the effectiveness and the value of the diplomatic efforts, including Blinken's fourth visit to the region.
Right, and our sources tell us that a lot of conversations are being held on what a post-conflict Gaza would look like, who would be ruling the Palestinian territories and the framework around all of that. But the Palestinians are being left out of the conversation for the most part.
That is very true, and I'm glad you brought up this point, because that's another point of contention and difference and discrepancy between the American position and the Israeli position. The Israeli position has been very threatening and very worrisome. It has been talking about things like losing all faith and all trust in any form of Palestinian authority in the post-war Gaza, and even talking about some kind of reappearance or re-existence in Gaza again from the Israeli side, which basically raises the alarm about a potential Israeli reoccupation of Gaza at some point. Even though it talks about it as a temporary phase, it is still very worrisome to the United States administration, which has a completely different vision for post-war Gaza. The United States is talking about the possibility of having some kind of renovated Palestinian authority, whatever that means, which would bring about some kind of stability to post-war Gaza and maintain peace in this region without the Hamas fighters and without Hamas existence. So it is still talking about some kind of Palestinian authority and some kind of Palestinian representation in post-war Gaza, which is very different from the Israeli position.
Do you think that their ultimate aim here is to push the Gazans out of the enclave, to bring Israeli settlers into the enclave, given the rhetoric that we've been hearing from Israeli politicians over the last couple of weeks?
I mean, that has been always a very contentious and very difficult issue. We know that this is not something new. We know that these types of goals or aims have been there for some time. This has been a scenario that has been talked about, the possibility of escalating and continuing to escalate the fighting and the assault on innocent civilians, many of whom, as we know, are, basically infants and children and women and elderly people, in order to bring this horrible humanitarian crisis and to have this kind of toll on innocent civilians in Gaza increase day after day, and with the possibility of maybe trying to push them out of the Gaza enclave and create some kind of ethnic cleansing, and therefore, pave the way for some kind of Israeli reinvasion of the enclave, at least on a temporary basis, in order to create a number of geostrategic goals and objectives for the Israeli side. Now, the United States does not have a big appetite for this scenario, and therefore, I think that part of, American diplomacy, including Blinken's, fourth visit, has been the attempt to try to contain this whole crisis before it explodes and expands even more and brings in other regional players, especially like Hezbollah and Iran, which is something the United States is not really, very much interested in. It wants to contain, especially as we come closer to the 2024 elections. The United States is not interested in seeing this conflict escalate or prolong, and that's where the difference comes in between both the Israeli and the American sides.
Right. We did see U.S. President Joe Biden speaking at an event where there were pro-Palestinian protesters calling for a ceasefire, and he responded to them saying that they are quietly trying to withdraw some of the Israeli troops from Gaza. Do you think that that's the public pressure that's making him speak like that? Or do you think that resulting from Biden's visit to Tel Aviv today, we will see Israel change its military tactics on the ground?
Well, I think that the international pressure and also the domestic pressure has been really escalating in an unprecedented way and an unprecedented degree. We have never seen this level and this degree of huge solidarity with Palestine and the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause. We have witnessed, in Washington, D.C., 500,000 people go out and protest in the streets of Washington. We have also seen protesters, hundreds of thousands of them, in the streets of Chicago, Detroit, New York, and other cities, as well as capitals around the world, right? We have seen that happen in Turkey. We have seen it happen in Paris, in London, in other major places around the world. And that is definitely something that the American administration is starting to take notice of. Not to mention also the approaching 2024 presidential election. That means that Biden really has to take all of these factors into consideration and has to think about the image and credibility of the United States on the international arena, which has been shaken tremendously by the one-sided, unconditional, support that the United States has been showing to its close ally Israel, without taking into account the plight and the just cause of the Palestinian people. That can very well cost the United States its international leadership, credibility, and moral authority on the international stage. It can also cost Biden and his administration a second term in the White House.
Fellow with the Middle East Council on Global Affairs, Sahar Khamis, thank you so much for being with us here on the NewsHour and sharing that analysis with us. I appreciate it.